And it's day 2 at NAB 2024, and I'm here with Bob Caniglia of Blackmagic Design. And you guys have a bit of a problem because you kind of announce way too many products. I feel like this is probably the biggest, the quantity of products ever, seems like, or close to.
Yes, it is definitely true because I do the price lists, and we had a lot of entries. Yeah, definitely our most prolific announcements across a huge area of the business, which I think is cool.
Cool. So let's dive right in. Start with cameras, and a whole new category of cameras, kind of, like in terms of the place they sit, price point.
Yeah, absolutely. The new URSA Cine 12K with a new sensor, new design, completely redesigned, features a lot of things that, in essence, what we did was say, what would we put in a camera if budget was no object and we could do anything we wanted? And so, there's Wi-Fi connectivity, there's a new media storage that we're using because you can record, 12K for 4 hours on a media dock. So we have a dock for the storage, and but the camera itself, has 16 stops of dynamic range, and it just hits a lot of marks. But it's designed, for high-end cinema work, and that's what it's for. And it doesn't have this hybrid sort of use case, and I think that's important. And of course, on the other side, we have the new Pixis camera, which is a box camera. And in typical Blackmagic fashion, it's not just a box camera. We put a monitor on there so you can get through the menus, and but you can still rig it out to whatever you want. And the new EVF that we have for the URSA Cine 12K works with the new Pixis, so you can mount that on there as well. And it's a different design for EVF, so you can mount it anywhere you want, and it's got a USB-C connection that locks in, so you can move it wherever you want. So that camera is designed for people that have been asking for it for years.
Yeah, and then in fact that's what I've heard from a lot of cinematographers. Like, this is exactly what we've been waiting for. And I think also on that 12K, it's kind of like this is really what people have been waiting for Blackmagic to come out with something that they can really treat as an A-level camera for whatever they're shooting.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that we teased about the future is the new 17K 65 millimeter version of this URSA Cine camera, and I think that is also showing the seriousness of where we feel that we can place cameras. So, yeah, A plus cameras.
Yeah. So let's talk about the decision to use custom media, because I imagine part of the problem is just the sheer amount of pixel data. You really couldn't trust that to an existing generic third-party solution.
Well, that's the thing. At this point, the file sizes are massive, right? And think about what the 65 millimeter 17K sensor is going to deal with, right? So because of that, we felt like it was time to do a module that we knew we could get the guaranteed recording capability, and I think that is important to everybody. But the true beauty of it is that you can still use an SSD if you want to plug that in. And the other thing is that dock can stay in the dock, and you can pull the files off the 10 gig Ethernet port or the Wi-Fi.
Wow, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then you're actually calling that a cloud drive or something, is that right?
Well, we have cloud docks. I mean, we have cloud storage products that call cloud storage, and we have new ones that are 24 terabytes and 48 terabytes. And a lot of what the workflow is now is that you record Blackmagic RAW and proxies at the same time, and using the Blackmagic cloud service, you can send the files to an editor anywhere in the world, kind of a thing. So all of that's there. Our cloud storage products that we call cloud are actually physical storage. It's not in the cloud, but they link to the cloud service and pull the files back and forth. And so
I have to say, I've only worked on one project where we used the cloud system, the Blackmagic cloud system, but it worked really well. I was surprised. I'm curious, are you wrestling to get adoption in that people are kind of stubbornly sticking to the traditional kind of offline media-based workflows?
Yeah, I think it's become a hybrid. And people, even if they're not really using the workflow to move the actual files through the cloud, they're moving the projects because that's easy, right? And so I think that it's become this sort of hybrid. And the more people use it, the more they're like, oh, this actually works. And, so it is fun to see people come back and they're like, I use this thing and it works. And I was like, well, I hope so. I mean, we've been using it a while of it. But it's good to watch people, adapt to these things. And Resolve itself, in the last 15 years, since almost 15 years that Blackmagic has owned it, has grown tremendously. And I was at DaVinci before, and back then, 200 people in the world maybe knew how to use one, and today it's everyone, So it is interesting to see that, but that whole workflow is definitely becoming more and more adopted, but I think these new cameras lend itself too because they're recording both the Blackmagic RAW and proxies at the same time.
Before we switch to Resolve, one last thing is the software iPhone camera.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It was an interesting choice. Obviously, there are other camera software apps out there. What was the decision there to build that into the ecosystem?
Well, the first thing it did was introduce the idea of shooting ProRes and proxies and using our Blackmagic cloud workflow. So it sort of introduces people to that. Then we added it to some of the cameras, so that's a continuation. Also, the menu structure is the same as our Blackmagic cameras. So what you're doing is giving people a tool that either they already know, or they're like, oh, this is pretty good. I would like to try a camera.
Easily migrate back and forth between models, which honestly is one of those things that people rarely talk about, but menu navigation is so frustrating. You can lose a long time on a set just trying to figure out a camera. So that's a kind of cool.
And we have our own operating system, which allows us to put the Blackmagic camera software on all the cameras to look the same. I mean, other than the fact that sometimes it's 12K or whatever, but the basics are all there. So anybody sees one of our new cameras like, well, I already know how to use this because of our menu structure. But at the show, we also announced that we're going to have an Android version of that app as well in the future.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk to Resolve. So the big item really is kind of live, right? The emphasis on this is a tool that is now going to be available for live implementations.
Yeah, it's just another example of how Resolve permeates throughout all of our products, and now it's talking to HyperDecks and our cloud storage and our switchers, and it's become this live replay system, and it's really going well. There's a replay editor box, a keyboard for that, and but it really is something that it's a different area for us. But it all makes sense when you start to think about it and go, well, yeah, if I'm creating the content in Resolve, I can play it back this way, people know how to do multicam, so why reinvent the wheel when the wheel's already there? We just had to put new spokes on it or something. But it is a big part of it, but 19 has so many other things. We have some new AI tools there's a new IntelliTrack AI that actually goes in the Fusion page, the Fairlight page, the audio page as the color page. It goes across the whole line there. There's some cool tools now. It's funny because it's not generative AI. It's just stuff that helps you do your job faster and quicker. Like we have there's a AI tracker for sound, right? So if you have a jet that flies across, normally you just keyframe the panning. Well, this is track that object. It'll move the sound for you and match. So, and that just saves time and makes it more accurate. And, then you can work on other things instead of rotoscoping everything.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I like those little easy use things that just take that one difficult, frustrating thing and make it.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to spend all day. Like, there's a thing, if they're shooting us, they can focus the background with, mouse clicks, And, in the past, that would take time, and maybe you wouldn't do it, or you would try to do it with multiple windows and things, and what are you spending all that time for when you're trying to do creative things? That's not necessarily a creative thing, it's a creative look, but how much time do you want to spend on that? And that's what these tools are doing, saving time.
Okay, a couple of other things. So we've got the hardware surface for the ATEMs, which is kind of cool because that's really one of those products that I think caught a lot of people by surprise. That you can, for $300, you can get this thing that does amazing live switching, has just about everything built in, green screens, all kinds of stuff, and now a dedicated hardware console for those sort of lower, more budget-oriented setups.
Yep, totally. I think what we were noticing is that not everybody was buying a panel for any of the switchers, right? But they like that dedicated key thing. And in the advanced panels, these are the same buttons, so it's very familiar. It's a smaller footprint. But I was telling somebody the other day, I said, it can access up to 4 MEs, with one of our 4 ME switchers. And they go, why would you use that? And I said, here's the thing. You're using maybe a bigger panel to use that 4 ME switcher, but you use the smaller one to access ME4 to put on the screens, to sub-switch. And it's much easier for that guy to use actual buttons to sub-switch than it is to use the software or something else. So there are definitely cool uses for it from the smallest switcher all the way up to the largest ones. And I think people have noticed it, and that was good. And then speaking of small things, we have a new color panel for Resolve, and the iPad can fit in there. But it's Bluetooth connectivity, rechargeable battery with USB-C, and it'll work with your laptop or workstation or your iPad. So it's very, very cool, and it's very well built, and it's available in multiple languages, which is a first. To have dedicated keyboards for 15 languages.
Want to pivot to something that's not as sexy, but surprisingly important, and that's the IP stuff, because typically that's only been available for sort of high-end broadcast installations, and now it's something that really, at any level, you can afford to access. I was particularly impressed just looking at the HDMI over IP solution. Mm-hmm. So maybe talk a little bit about what you guys are offering there.
Yeah, so we have a whole suite of SMPTE 2110 IP products, from a 16-port switch that looks like a video router, because that's what we've built. We've built IP products for the video and film biz, right? We're not there to try and reinvent a Cisco router. We're doing our own thing for the market that we are in. And we know that people want to send signals further distances than SDI goes, or HDMI for that matter. But now we have these boxes and this infrastructure, and we've created our own codec so that you can put 4K down a 10 gig Ethernet port. And since there's so much 10 gig in computers and wherever, it's easier ecosystem. Not everybody wants to move up to 100 gig or whatever. So we have allowances for the higher bandwidth, but we're trying to make products so that it's easy for people to use 10 gig and move 4K images, and this codec is going to be available to anybody, so anybody can put it in their products. It's free, it's open source basically, and so I think that it'll be cool to see some of the use cases there. I mean, I think that just running a monitor like at graduation or something to another building, so easy because they have 10 gig Ethernet infrastructure, real easy to just put that box on a big TV or a projector or whatever and pump in the signal there.
Anything else you want to call out? Obviously a lot of stuff there, but
yeah, I'll tell one other thing. We showed it last year on the Telecine Syntel scanner, and we now have an 8mm gate for that, so you can do 8mm, 60mm, and 35. Yeah,
that's actually kind of cool.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of 8mm out there. Yeah. For sure. So. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
If people want to check out more, obviously, blackmagicdesign.com, and you have a monstrous booth. Where is it this year?
It's South Lower Hall, right in front where we used to be.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.